Alright, today we're going to be inspecting and cleaning a carburetor on a 1975 Kawasaki G7. It's a 100 cc motorcycle, 2-stroke. So we've got the carburetor off the machine. To do the best job cleaning your carburetor, you want to make sure you take it off your machine. We've obviously taken the cable off the throttle tube here, and then it comes down and splits. And I'll show you how to remove this cable. It splits. One of the cables goes to the oil pump. And that's, you'll have to check out our other videos to show how we remove that off the oil pump. But then we've got one line coming down that controls this slide here. It goes up and down when you pull that throttle. Also up top here we've got our choke cable, and we're going to go through and show you how to disassemble all this. This top cap here is a seal, and it seals that carburetor from any debris getting down into that housing where that carburetor is kept. This carburetor is kind of the old way of doing it, and it works very well, but it is on no other motorcycles nowadays will you see a carburetor like this that's inside of the crankcase. So we've got this cap. There's a spring that goes around here. It's kind of a spring keeper that holds this cap on, and we can just kind of lift that up out of place. You won't be able to lift it very far because this choke cable holding it up. And what you can do is take a 12mm wrench and remove that cap. But we also, here, and I'll show you how to remove all of this so you can get this seal just completely out of the way. But for now, we'll take this 12mm cap, pull it off of here. Your plunger and everything will come up with it. As far as the cap goes, take and unscrew that. Just a regular cap with some very fine threads. And this is an aluminum cap with aluminum carburetor, so you got to be very careful you get that straight going back together. Then once you get that cap unscrewed off of there, you can just pull up on that entire assembly. We'll set the carburetor aside here while we take a look at these other pieces. Now what you do, there's a keeper or cotter pin that runs through there. I like to take a small screwdriver because it's kind of deep down inside this knob, and just pull these tabs up, straighten them up, and then take a pair of side dikes, wire cutters, and straighten these out. If you have access to a pin this same size, it's always good going back together to put a new pin in here. A lot of times if it's the first time it's taken out, you can reuse it, but I like to always just put a new one in there if I have one available. So then take and just kind of pry that pin out of there. Be really careful you don't bend the cap or that choke lever in places that it shouldn't be bending. So we've got that pin out there, and then we're able just to lift that cap off. Then what you can just do is slide that down just like that. So we'll take and put that pin and this cap together. This is the choke assembly here with the plunger and the cap all together. Now we're going to take and do kind of the same thing with the throttle cable here. We've got 8mm to loosen that. It's smaller than that. And also we've got another keeper. This is your idle adjust here, and that can be adjusted from up top of your crankcase. You don't have to take that cover off to adjust the idle. So take a small screwdriver, a little bit bigger than this maybe, stick it down through here, and then you're actually adjusting the idle, which is essentially just pulling this up or down inside of this housing. So that we can leave on there. If we're cleaning this cable, on the other hand, we're going to want to remove that to do a good job of cleaning. Take a 6mm, must be a 7. If you can get a good hold on it with a pair of pliers, you can do that, but I like to get the correct size. Well, the other thing that you can do, you don't have to remove that quite yet. We'll take this spring, pick it all the way up. And then what you do, I like to just pinch this spring down here, and you can take and push that down, slide that piece over into the groove that's a little bit larger, allows you to pull that cap out of there. I guess that does no good if that keeper that holds that cable in slid out of place there like we wanted. this idle adjust here, same thing as that choke, it's got a pin running through here. Then you just push that pin out the other side, grab it with a pair of pliers, lift that out. Now this pin will just slide out the bottom and you're able to take everything out there. So this piece here, you can push out the bottom. This is obviously the idle adjust, goes up top here. We've got your spring that slides down in there. And then this keeper holds your throttle cable on. We'll set those aside and we'll go ahead and clean that carburetor now. Now this piece is completely off of there. You want to make sure this is all clean going back together as well. Now we've got your cable completely separate. We can slide, if we're replacing this boot, we can slide that off and replace that. Got your carburetor. I like to take and set it upside down to start. Got 4 Phillips screws on the bottom here to hold this bowl on. And here is your drain. Now if your fuel's, if you've got a fuel leak or your motorcycle's bouncing around, fuel will dump out the bottom of this carburetor here. I'll show you the tab that it goes through. But you want to make sure that this is cleaned out and doesn't have any debris plugging it up. Otherwise your fuel is not going to be allowed to drain, and that fuel could potentially go into that motor and cause some issues. So got these 4 loose. I take this cap here, you just slip it off. It's a rubber cap. It pulls off of there, kind of seals on the bottom over top of these 2 nipples here. So once we get that, those four screws taken out, I can take and tap on that carburetor. This gasket here kind of seals it up really good. Now those 2 nipples that come out the bottom here, you've got 2 different heights for these. If you've got fuel dripping out, they're coming out these 2 tabs here, and that fuel is bouncing around in that carburetor, sloshing around in here, it's coming up and dumping out of here. And that just keeps your fuel from dumping into your motor. It's supposed to dump out the bottom of these here. So that's why you want to make sure that this is not plugged. Now we've got your main jet here. Takes a flat screwdriver to loosen that main jet. I believe this is a 77.5, if I remember right. And it'll say stock jets show on the top. And then we've got a washer down here underneath that main jet. You want to make sure that you remember where that goes. These jets here, you want to take carbon choke cleaner. I like this Gum Out brand to clean these out. So you can take and spray them. I take compressed air and blow through them, just to make sure that when you hold them up to light, you can see through them fairly clearly. I mean, very clearly. You don't have any debris plugging that area. Those ports are extremely small, so you want to make sure that they are cleaned out before going back together. This here, so that was your main jet that we just took apart. This is your pilot jet in this hole here. Takes a very small flat screwdriver. You want to make sure you're completely seated on that before you start removing it. This pilot jet it's got a very small port in it. If your motorcycle has a hard time starting, generally it's a pilot jet's issue. A little bit of sand or debris in your fuel come up through this pilot jet, get stuck in here, and not allow you to pull fuel through. This jet, if I remember right, is a 17.5, which is a very small port. So you'll be able to see through it, but it'll be very small hole. Now I've got your pin here. This is what you call your float, and it's adjustable. Your needle and seat are adjustable. So if you've got a lot of fuel dumping out of this carburetor just sitting on its side stand, and you think that you need to adjust this to fix that issue, just slightly bend down this tab here. When your carburetor is in this position, you bend it down. So if your carburetor is upside down, like it's or right side up, like it's normally setting, you'll lift up on that tab. But so this pin here, push it out with a screwdriver or something small, a pick of some sort, and then you can take and grab a hold of it either with your fingers or a small pair of pliers. Lift it out. You want to make sure these are aluminum tabs here, and they break very easily. So if this rod here isn't coming out very easily, you want to be really careful tapping on these posts here, getting it out. Got a little bit further to go there. And there is your float there. You want to make sure that there's no holes in it, no major wear. Here is your needle here, and then we have an adjustable seat right down here. Again, you want to make sure that these are clean. Make sure there's no debris stuck on them. Make sure they're not grooved or any kind of damage at all, or your fuel is going to continue to flow through your carburetor and out the bottom of your motorcycle or into your engine. This is a replaceable seat here. Just take a wrench here, unscrew this seat here, and you can replace it. There's an O-ring underneath. You want to make sure it goes back in there. This is your gasket here. You always want to make sure this is a good gasket, or you're going to have fuel leaking in between your carburetor body and your bowl here. You want to make sure you put a new one in there. If you got a carb kit, they generally come with a carb kit. So going back to the other end, we've got your brass washer there, and then you can take your main jet, put it on there. All of this should be cleaned and sprayed out with a carbon choke cleaner and compressed air. I'm going to seat this jet here and then put your pilot jet in, and I'll show you an air fuel screw. Make sure it's good and snug. Your carburetor is going to be sitting like this, so those jets are gonna want to loosen up unless you get them tight, but you don't need to over tighten them because these are brass going into an aluminum carburetor and they strip out easily. Here's your air fuel screw here, and the way you adjust this, it's got a spring in behind there, and you take and you seat that completely down. So you count how many turns you screwed in. There's 1.5, 2, 2.25. So then if you're taking it out and cleaning it up really good, putting it back together, you want to take it till it's completely seated and then back it off the same number of turns. So 1/4 turn, 1, 1/2, 2. That's 2.25 turns out. So that is your spec, or your book will, or your manual will tell you exactly what you need to be for your altitude and conditions, riding conditions, but ours was 2.25. Needle is going to go down inside that jet again, and this is just going to sit right down on top of it. Take your pin, push it through there. And then just gently tap it in if you need to. So we've got our bowl that's going to go back on. Make sure this is cleaned out really good. Carbon choke cleaner. Then you can blow through that with compressed air. Set that down on top. Take our 4 screws then and set them right back down there. Tighten them up. And again, you don't have to be getting them extremely tight, but they will have a tendency to want to loosen up just because of how this carburetor is sitting. Once these are snug, all right, now for your needle here, that's going to slide right back down in here. It's got a groove on it, so it's only going to go in on one direction, which is good. Kind of keeps things simple. But we also have an adjustable needle here. So this needle just pushes out the top, and your circlip here can be adjusted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different settings. And we are right now right in the middle. Carb kit will a lot of times come with a new needle, and it'll tell you where to adjust that at. So I'm going to go ahead. We got to set this needle back down in there. Then our keeper here, I'm just going to set. I'm not going to hook the cables back up, because I'm just going to do this to keep the carburetor together. So we just set the keeper down in there, and it'll fall down into place. This will slide right up there. And again, this is the idle adjust. Remember, we looked at that at the beginning of the video. Oops, I got this flipped around. You know, we've got a pin that's going to run through. Going to run through that idle. And I'm forgetting the spring. So without putting that cable, it's kind of a little difficult, and we're going to have to do this all again. I just kind of wanted to show you how to do all this, but put that back in. That idle adjust screw will come up through there. Then you take and put that pin in there. gets that pin, well, this isn't the right pin. Once we get the pin in there, it'll hold that idle adjust from falling out. This is the pin for the choke, which isn't the right one, but. All right, and that is the carburetor on 1975 Kawasaki 100.